Welcome everybody, good evening. I'm Paul from Simply Rhino. We're happy to have organised this UK user group meeting for this evening. We just have a single presentation for you this evening, which is from Michael Eden, who you can see now on screen. So I'm joined by Steph, who's also from Simply Rhino, and Michael. Michael is a well-known ceramics designer here in the UK, with a particular focus and interest in additive and digital manufacturing techniques also, and a long standing customer of ours. So welcome, Michael. So I just wanted to say that if anyone has any sound issues, occasionally we do have people that have a few sound issues, please let us know within the chat and we can give you some tips on how to resolve that. But basically, if you log out and join back in, 9 times out of 10, that fixes any issues that could come up. Now, questions, there is a question tab that you should see. We would encourage you all, please, to type questions in there. These questions will be posed to Michael at the end of his presentation, which will be in about half an hour's time. And then we hope to have a sort of lively discussion and Q&A with everybody then. It's also possible that if anybody actually wants to join the conversation live, I mean, it's even possible that we could turn your webcam on, but you know, so you can join us and actually join in the conversation, either just on audio, or audio and video is even possible. Okay, so also just to point out that it's being recorded this evening, so it will be posted on our YouTube channel as usual, along with all the other user group meetings that we've hosted in the coming days. So other than that, I'm now going to hand over to Michael. So, and I'll see you with the three of us. We'll come back at the end for the Q&A. Okay, over to you, Michael.
Okay, thank you very much. Yes, hopefully you can now see my the first image. Is that the case? I presume it is.
That's the case. It's all good.
Okay, thanks, Steph. Thank you. So, well, many thanks for the invitation to speak at this year's Rhino Users Group meeting. I must admit, I am a bit apprehensive, as you're about to see, that I am by no means a Rhino expert. So instead, this presentation is fundamentally about making things and the journey that I have made, going from transforming clay into pots by hand to forming them from digital data. Oh, what's happened here? Here we go. Sorry about that. Making things, whether using traditional or digital processes, requires the use of our hands. It may appear that our hands are less important in digital manufacturing, but I'm not so sure about that. As babies, we use our hands to connect us to the physical world. We use them to explore and explain, to make solid all those confusing shapes and colors that we are bombarded with. So through our hands, we become engaged with the world around us, but the learning process goes both ways. Our hands educate our brains, and then our brains educate our hands. Over time, our hands become more dexterous and more able to closely follow the instructions that our brain sends to them. But there's also a feedback mechanism where the hands inform the brain. They are, you might say, thinking hands. Even in our predominantly digital world, I think it is fundamentally important to understand material properties and to develop manual skills in order to select the most appropriate way for a project to be successful. And it's this approach that underpins my practice. But back to the beginning. And this is a view of our little shop in Kendal, Cumbria, on the edge of the Lake District, up in the northwest of England. So long before I started doing what I do now, I became a potter. My entry into ceramics was very much a crash course. I had some experience of making pots at school and then at college and then at Leeds Polytechnic on an industrial design course. But in 1981, newly married, we moved my wife's pottery to a little shop in Kendal on the edge of the Lake District. I had to attempt to learn repetition throwing of the mugs, jugs and bowls that she had designed, and it certainly wasn't easy. Most of my early efforts were rejected, but eventually what I made could be put out onto the shelves for sale. And as my confidence increased, so did my desire to experiment and to develop some of my own designs. A few years later, we moved to where we live now, and for about 25 years, my wife and I ran the pottery, where we designed, made and supplied masses of functional slipware. That's the kind of pottery we made, slip decorated earthenware. And we supplied shops and galleries, and then stores like Habitat in the UK and Barney's in the US and Japan. The work we produced then was decorative and it was functional. So over time, inevitably, I developed the craft skills and the tacit knowledge required to produce lively pots. In pieces like this, I was just trying to sort of freeze a moment in time to capture the brush or the slip trailer going across the surface of the clay, and also to record the effects of flame interacting with these rich lead glazes. We fired some of the work at that time in a big wood-fired kiln that I built. These pots, as I say, were very much about the materials and the processes that I used to make them. But alongside my love of ceramics, I've been developing an interest in digital technology. When websites came in, I thought it would be useful to have one for the business, but I wanted to design the website myself. So I enrolled on an evening class at the local school, and this was way before Squarespace and WordPress and all those. I learned to write HTML code, and in doing so, I discovered that it involves a different way of thinking, a different way of problem solving to ceramics. It's a very different thought process. And at around the same time, I'd also heard about something then called rapid prototyping. Now we know it as additive manufacturing or 3D printing. And I thought, well, this could be fantastic. In theory, I could make anything. Well, moving on a bit, in 2006, I was fortunate to be accepted by the Royal College of Art in London to undertake an MPhil research project. Basically, I needed time out from the pottery in order to develop the ideas that have been bubbling away for a number of years. And I also wanted to have my thinking challenged in a critical but supportive environment, and that is certainly what I got. Having worked as a potter for over 25 years, even though I was always up for to engage with new ideas and try new things, there is a certain element of doing something the way you've always done it without questioning it too much. So going off to the Royal College, I didn't want to wipe the slate clean, far from it, but I wanted to have those sort of entrenched ways of thinking challenged. And as I say, that is certainly what I got. Anyway, returning to what I was saying earlier about hands, I wanted to explore whether I could transfer the hands-on embedded craft skills that I developed to the hands-off world of digital making. And at this stage, I got in touch with Paul at Simply Rhino and started to learn to use Rhino software. So this is, when is this? 2006. And I've been struggling with it ever since. No, not really struggling, but anyway, I'll come to all this. But I found Rhino to be a very useful extension of my sketchbook. I found it quite easy to develop numerous iterations of a simple idea like this. And though the virtual, what you see on screen, is certainly no replacement for the actual, the physical, there's enough visual information on the screen to determine whether the sort of geometry and the proportions of a piece are going to work. And once I was happy with the design on screen, I could then translate the virtual into the actual using traditional pottery methods such as throwing and slab building. Jumping forward, by the end of my 2 years at the Royal College, I really wanted to put what I had learnt to the test and produce this. And it was called the Wedgwoodant tureen, named in honour of Josiah Wedgwood. But Wedgwood was at the forefront of the first industrial revolution, and he created new materials and processes that revolutionised industrial ceramics. In fact, you could say he invented industrial ceramics. So I wanted to create something that was inspired by Wedgwood, but made using the technology of this new so-called industrial revolution. After a few trial runs, it was successfully printed on a Z-core, a Z-core machine, in the standard, whatever it was called, 131 material, I think it was. It's a sort of plaster gypsum material, which was then infiltrated to give it more strength. After which, it was then coated in a non-fired ceramic material to closely resemble Wedgwood's black basalt. At the time, I was collaborating with a French company who'd developed a non-fired ceramic coating that could be stained virtually any color. So we spent some time experimenting to reproduce Wedgwood's black basalt. And the result of all this was, as I say, the Wedgwoodant tureen, so called because it would have been impossible to make with the technology available in Wedgwood's day. Having the CAD data of a design, it's, as I'm sure you all know, it's fairly straightforward to alter the proportions and the scale of an object. So I was able to create a number of unique pieces, sometimes decorated in traditional Wedgwood colours and sometimes not. This one actually spent most of 2012, the year of the London Olympics, in 10 Downing Street, the Prime Minister's residence. A few years later, I came back to the Wedgwoodant tureen to explore how I could work with traditional materials and techniques. Because I think there's a great deal of untapped potential in combining making processes. In this case, you've got 21st century 3D printing and 4,000-year-old lost wax bronze casting. And for me, the result demonstrates that it's possible to create artworks with the material cultural associations that were previously impossible to make. Here's another example of my use of digital tools and traditional craft skills. This is one of the designs I came up with for a design business called Established & Sons. And it was a glass project, and pieces were made in Murano near Venice by Vanini. And this is the vase, it's the Audrey vase. And I don't know whether you can see that there is the profile of a face, and it was actually the face, the profile of Audrey Hepburn that I used. So if you look at if you can't see the face, if you look at the red section, the right hand profile of the red section of the vase, coming from the top, you're coming down the forehead and then down into the nose, then the lips, and then the chin. The outer section is supposed to represent the sort of curve of her hair, coming down towards, you're coming down the top of the head and then sweeping down in front of the ear and down to the neck. I also produced a large pendant lampshade that's actually, that one's hanging up in our living room. My CAD drawings had to be translated into the wooden mold that you see here. It's a huge wooden mold that had to be carved, and the glass blower, as you can see, then has to fill the mold by part blowing the glass, enclosing it in that two-part mold, and then continue to blow this huge amount of glass whilst turning it to ensure that it completely fills the internal profile of the mold. And once it's sort of, it's filled the mold, then work continues just to sort of refine the shape. And this is a huge amount of glass, as I say, and this is being constantly moved, so it doesn't sort of melt and droop and drop off the rod. So yeah, that was the Audrey series. I could run through everything that I've designed and made since leaving the RCA in 2008, but that would probably take all night and probably bore you to sleep, I think. So I'll just focus on a few pieces where I've tried to challenge myself and the technology. I wonder if many of you have experienced working with clay. In the Vortex and Maelstrom series, I attempt to digitally emulate the traditional technique of coiled pottery, where sausages of clay are rolled out and used to build up vessels. And this was another attempt to explore the similarities and differences between digital and analog making processes. To achieve this, I used some simple Rhino script code to generate a series of virtual coils of varying length and diameter. I then selected a group of the coils and manipulated and stretched them to form a cylinder. From there, I could arrange and shape them. It was a project that really got me thinking about the way that the brain and the hand work together, partly consciously, but mostly instinctively, which I presume must be based on previous experience, both visual and physical. And working on this project made me realize that there is a craft to using 3D software. Like any other craft, it requires time spent learning the basics, then many hours of practice until the knowledge becomes embedded. You do hear that it takes 10,000 hours to master a craft. Well, since 2006, I think I've spent far more than 10,000 hours sat in front of this computer, wrestling and trying to get the upper hand of Rhino. So maybe I am, after all, a Rhino master crafts person. But anyway, you can decide about that. You probably all have a mobile phone within reach, and like me, turn to them for information and for experiences. And I decided to create a piece that explores the relationship between the actual world of real objects and the virtual world of digital technology. And this is the Voxel Vessel. A voxel, as I'm sure you know, is a three-dimensional pixel. The starting point for this piece was the virtual tour of the Chateau de Fontainebleau via the Google Art Project. It's, for those who haven't explored it, it's like Google Street View, and it allows the viewer to float through galleries and museums around the world and zoom in on anything that catches their fancy. So you can sort of float through the empty galleries from the comfort of your armchair. You don't need to queue up for the Uffizi in Florence. And yeah, I think it's a technical achievement. It's extraordinary, and it's a very useful tool, but it's not the real thing. You can't smell the oil paint, and you can't quite walk all the way around the sculptures as they sort of distort wildly as you go past them. It is a 2D representation of the real world. Well, in one of the bedrooms, I spotted a pair of unusual Sèvres porcelain vases each side of this bed. In an attempt to see more, I zoomed in, but the image pixelates and it becomes difficult to see the details, which to me reinforces the knowledge that you're not actually there in the room. So I decided to respond to this experience by making a piece that converted the blurred 2D image into a 3D object. So first of all, I designed a sort of vase form. I didn't strictly keep to the form of the one I saw in the chateau. I came up with something else. But anyway, so I first designed the vase form, and then you can see all those sort of overlapping pixel curves that I drew. I then extruded the curves, a small group at a time. And then laboriously, each single one of the hundreds, if not thousands of these extrusions had to be shrunk down so that it was a little longer. It was just projecting out each side of the surface of the vase form. And then I joined them together, and after which I could boolean through the extrusions with the base form to create a sort of joined together version of a sort of voxelated version of the vase. I've omitted a few stages, which included sort of twisting the base form, then doing all the extrusions and all that stage of cutting through and joining them together, and then untwisting the whole thing, which creates a more sort of dynamic vessel rather than being sort of just square on. And as I mentioned earlier, these pieces represent the loss of sensory experience when accessing the real world through a screen. The interior surfaces are decorated with coloured silver leaf, which is a sort of reference to the beauty of the original ceramic objects. And I suppose it's in honour of the craftsmanship in their manufacture. A few years ago, I was invited to help with a project that allowed me to work with bronze again. This is a fairly new building at the corner of Savile Row and Conduit Street in central London, designed by EPR Architects. Savile Row has been the centre for bespoke tailoring for a very long time, and the architect felt that it was important to make a statement about craftsmanship in this building. So the exterior has been clad in about 11,000 beautiful hand-glazed ceramic tiles developed by the potter Kate Malone. 4 sections are in white, this sort of mottled white, and one section is in this blue-black. And this is a close-up of the crystalline glaze that Kate developed and then used. A panel was needed that would run along the base of the building, something more durable than the ceramic tiles at that level. And this is where I came in. Kate approached me to see if I could create something that related to these crystal patterns. So I started to design a series of sort of archetypal crystal shapes that then had to be arranged individually. So basically, I'm trying to make a panel, a 1.5 meter square panel filled with these crystals. So some were embossed and others were placed in relief in order to create a sort of sense of depth. And as you can imagine, it took a great deal of time, as I wanted to ensure that there would be an even distribution of elements and that the whole panel would have a dynamic appearance. This is just sort of part of it. And yeah, here's a bit more detail of the panel. The enormous data file was sent to the JT Price Foundry in Newcastle under Lyme, where a panel was CNC milled, from which the molds for sand casting could be made. And yeah, these were, as I say, sand cast in bronze. We had a series of test pieces of different stages of the design process made in order to have some physical objects to evaluate and also to sample the patination treatments, because yeah, they wanted to have them this sort of rich sort of anthracite carbon black. And after all the tests were completed and everyone was happy with the design and the outcome, the panels were finally cast, then cut and installed. The bronze panels, as I say, will be far more durable than the ceramic tiles and wouldn't be damaged if bashed by street cleaning machines or whatever. Occasionally, when I'm in London, I'll walk down Savile Row or Conduit Street just to see how they're standing up to the wear and tear of the London environment, and it's quite interesting to see where dogs have peed on them as it enhances the patination. Oops, I'm sorry, I'm just going ahead of myself here. Let me just, in a completely different project now. In 2016, I was invited by LACMA, the Los Angeles County Museum of Art, to create an interpretation of the Stowe vase, which is it's a Roman vase that was excavated from Hadrian's villa near Rome in 1769. At first, I was daunted by the challenge of translating the complex surface relief decoration, but as I researched its history, I discovered that it had been taken into the workshop of Giovanni Piranesi for restoration. What I also discovered was that Piranesi wasn't averse to cobbling together vases from bits and pieces from the archaeological digs and flogging them, selling them to the next English or British or whatever aristocrat passing through on his grand tour. I think he was a bit apart from being an extremely talented artist, I think he didn't miss a chance to make a few bob. And I never, until I went over to Los Angeles, I never actually saw the actual Stowe vase. I was having to do everything from 6,000 miles away, and so anyway, to cut a long story short, whilst in his workshop, Piranesi produced these beautiful etchings of the vase, which I decided to use as the starting point. So I had to simplify them in the creation of these drawings. That's obviously just a small section of it. And then convert my drawings to curves, which could then be extruded. Which was very time consuming, as I don't know a simple way to import line drawings into Rhino and translate them directly to curves. I'd be very interested to know if there is a way, and dare say that I've probably missed some simple technique. So maybe that's something we could have a chat about afterwards. And if you know how to do this, please let me know. I could then use those extrusions to cut through the vase form, like I did with the Voxel Vessel. After a month or so of sitting in front of this computer translating the 2D design to virtual 3D, it was a bit nerve-wracking and then a relief to finally see the printed vase, as I felt it was really important to capture the essence of the original. And when I finally went over to Los Angeles for the exhibition, I had a happy surprise. The shadow cast by the vase is actually very similar in appearance to the Piranesi etchings. After the LACMA project, I was invited by the Rothschild Foundation to hold a large solo exhibition at Waddesdon Manor in Buckinghamshire. It's a sort of Renaissance-style French chateau built in the 1880s, which houses the huge collection of art and artifacts collected by Ferdinand de Rothschild. At the outset, it was clear that I was going to be given a great deal of freedom to discover and interpret the stories hidden in both the collection and the house itself. In order to facilitate this, I collaborated with Scan the World, an organization that's amassing a huge number of 3D scans of museum artworks, which are freely available to download from their website. Working with them, and under the guidance of the Waddesdon team, we were able to 3D scan a group of extremely valuable 18th century French Sèvres porcelain vessels, which were then used as the starting point for my interpretations. And going back to the Stowe vase, the previous piece, for a moment, I wonder what I would have produced if I'd been able to scan or actually even see the original marble vase. Looking at the screen during the scanning process, I wasn't all that optimistic about what would be captured, but it actually exceeded my expectations. In fact, the scans are highly detailed. One of the features of the scanning process, it's a glitch or a happy accident, depending on which way you look at it, is that the 2D painted decoration that you can see in the left-hand image was translated into a sort of low relief surface. And for me, it's a happy accident. Because it gives the artwork a sort of digital fingerprint. It's evidence of the scanning process, which to me makes a direct link to making by hand, where materials and process, the process you choose, literally make their mark. And in making things by hand, as I'm sure lots of you know, things can go wrong. And sometimes from those mistakes or errors, a new idea will come. And so experimenting, making mistakes can actually be quite positive. Pieces like this Sèvres porcelain cuvette are completely bonkers with all its sort of Rococo curlicues. And I used that as the starting point for an interpretation called Rococo. I created a Rococo pattern in Photoshop, imported it into Rhino, laboriously copied it, and then extruded it and used it to sort of cut through the solid virtual model. As well as making use of these Sèvres porcelain scans, I also took liberties with the Scan the World library of 3D scans. My aim was to create an artwork featuring museum star attractions and popular 20th century cultural icons. So you've got, what have you got here? You've got Apollo and Nefertiti, Einstein, you've got a Mickey Mouse and an astronaut, all sorts of like museum star attractions, and then things from comic books and what have you. I wanted to question why they attain a sort of financial and cultural status and have a bit of fun as well. My exhibition at Waddesdon Manor was one of the highlights of my career to date, alongside the history of the manor and the vast number of objects that could be used for inspiration. The success of the exhibition came about from working with a wonderful curatorial team and Adrian Sassoon London, which is the gallery that I am represented by. Here's a short film of the exhibition, showing how it was laid out with my work and objects from the Waddesdon collection. I wanted the exhibition to be quite theatrical, so it was arranged in sections like rooms, starting sort of cool and monotone, going through to brightly lit sort of bling fest. Oh, that piece was copper plated, and then I created the patina, and there's the house in all its glory. Yeah, so that was 2018. We also had a 3D printer building sort of mini versions of the Sèvres vases, which attracted a lot of children who then really seemed excited about my artworks. And I think that the juxtaposition of my work amongst objects and furniture from the collection successfully helped visitors to gain an insight into the making of my contemporary interpretations, and also to view the historical pieces from a new perspective. So yeah, that was the sort of bling fest of my pieces amongst some of the original Sèvres pieces, and we also created these huge prints taken from the Rhino screenshots, basically. About 3 weeks after the opening of the Waddesdon exhibition, I spent a couple of months on a residency in Boston, where I was able to experiment with a company that had developed 3D ceramic powder printing. They were using a large voxel jet printer to print a ceramic powder that could be fired and glazed. I wanted to give both them and myself a challenge, so I used the Rococo vase as a starting point. To give us a chance of success, I reduced the amount of fine detail, and this, the first attempt, was far more successful than anticipated. But in a way, the printing was the easy part. The vase needed to be fired, and because the printed ceramic powder doesn't behave like conventionally produced ceramics, the firing was a challenge. However, it worked really well. It was fired in a ceramic container filled with these little alumina beads, which support the structure during the firing. There was no apparent slumping or distortion, though there was shrinkage. However, the shrinkage is taken into account at the printing stage by scaling up the prints in order to allow for the shrinkage during the firing. After the first firing, the vase was stable enough to be decorated and could be fired again after glazing without requiring any supports. And this version was given the full-on 24 karat gold luster treatment. Since then, things have been a bit quiet. All the art fairs I normally attend with my gallery have gone online, and a broken collarbone from a road rage cycling incident, and then having COVID prevented me from working for months last year. However, I am developing some new ideas and have an exhibition in Nashville planned for September. No, actually it's August next year. I've just heard that it's been brought forward to August. That's in Nashville, Tennessee, in a big house called Cheekwood. So that should be interesting. Even though I've been using Rhino since 2006, and as I said at the outset, I certainly don't feel that I'm an expert. I still really only use or understand a fraction of the tools. My approach is to start with an idea, explore it, do the research, explore it in my sketchbook until I've got a fairly clear idea of what I want to produce, and then I move to Rhino. I want the idea to lead the way, not the software. So I use trial and error a lot in order to make it do what I want it to do. In fact, often it'll get to about 4 o'clock in the afternoon and I'm struggling to get to the next stage in the development of a design. So it's time to ride my bike, and I'll go off round the lanes of Cumbria here, supposedly sort of just enjoying the countryside, but then an idea will suddenly pop into my head of how to get onto the next stage. But if that doesn't work, over the years, Phil Cook at Simply Rhino has been an enormous help. He's always willing to answer my daft questions and spends time helping me to achieve what I'm aiming for. Having recently upgraded to Rhino 7, I'm quite excited to explore quad mesh and sub-D tools, as I can see that they will be a great help in being able to create more organic forms that can be sort of stretched and manipulated in a similar way to clay. I could go on sort of showing you more of my work, but you've probably seen enough and have an idea of what I'm about. So in summing up, I hope that I've communicated that though I have been able to create some sort of impossible objects through the use and appropriation of digital technology, the role of the hand and the way it can be trained to master new skills without losing the old skills is absolutely central to my practice. As I said before, we train our hands and our hands educate and inform us in return. And together that enables us to form and transform. Thank you very much. And I think if we have any questions, we can sort of open things up. So I'll wait for Stephanie to exit the screen. So.
Perfect. Thanks, Michael.
A pleasure.
That's brilliant. I think Paul's going to join us in 1 second.
Okay, do I need to do anything here, Stephanie?
No, you're all good. Thanks, Michael. Just wait for Paul to join us. There we go.
Okay. Thanks, Michael. Excellent.
Fantastic.
Thank
Enjoyed
you.
that.
Thanks, Paul.
Yeah, it did make me think if we should perhaps we could ask all our customers if they wouldn't mind going out for a cycle before calling back on support calls. They could perhaps
Yeah,
come to some really nice solutions of their own and get fit and have some fresh air all at the same time. I like
exactly.
that idea.
It amazes me. You know, you think you're cycling along, you're watching out. Well, certainly around here, watching out for potholes and enjoying the countryside, watching a buzzard circling around or whatever.
Yeah.
And suddenly, like out of nowhere, an idea will just pop into your head. Okay, if I do it that way around, if I do that, if I use that tool first and then that tool, maybe I'll get onto the next stage. It amazes me how the brain is sort of bubbling away in the background when you don't realize that it's churning away.
Yes, yes. Well, and you're lucky, of course, to be in the Lake District.
Well, this week it's not been too wonderful. It's been a glorious day today, but I haven't been able to go out on my bike, unfortunately. But hey ho. So, do I need to stop sharing this screen?
Oh no, you don't. Yeah, I think everyone. It's my screen now, so it's okay, Michael.
Okay.
So it's just a couple of questions
Okay.
for you that I have here, and maybe Steph may have one or two. Someone asked your next exhibition, but I guess I know this person's in the UK and probably may not be able to get to Nashville. Anything planned in the UK, Michael, that's coming up?
With Adrian Sassoon with the gallery, we attend.
Yes.
Yeah, we attend art fairs. Now the art fairs been on hold. They've just gone sort of digital, online over since the pandemic. But we're hoping that things will start again next year. The first show that we're hoping we'll be attending is in Maastricht. It's the big TEFAF, Arts and Antiques Fair in Maastricht. After which it should be Masterpiece, which is normally held in June in London. At the it's where the Chelsea Flower Show is held. And in sort of Fulham area in London, but Masterpiece should be the next one. I don't have any. Do I have any? No, I've no solo exhibitions planned apart from the Nashville one at the moment. But you never know. We'll see what happens.
Okay. And isn't the Adrian Sassoon, isn't that a permanent exhibition within some gallery space there in Chelsea or something?
Yeah, well, it's not actually. It doesn't actually have a sort of shop window, as it were, a sort of normal gallery. They work from. It's actually offices in the house of Adrian Sassoon in Knightsbridge, just up the road from the Knightsbridge tube station. But you can go there by appointment. So take a look at the adriansassoon.com website and you'll get an idea of the artworks, the different makers that they represent. And Adrian Sassoon, I think, is the foremost gallery showing sort of arts and well, let's think ceramics, metal, glass, and then precious metals as well. The work they show at these art fairs and in exhibitions is phenomenal. There's some. I'm very fortunate to be represented by Adrian Sassoon because I'm in extremely good company. Some amazingly skilled and creative makers are represented by Adrian.
Hmm.
So yeah, well worth having a look at the website at least.
Yes, I have in the past, and it certainly, yes, it's impressive stuff. Yeah, question here from Carla. Okay, she says, thanks, Michael. Great presentation.
Thank you.
She's a Rhino user that just got back to ceramic classes. Okay, in Spain. Your work is really inspiring. If you do workshops, I would love to join. I don't know if that's something you've done. I know that you've done. You do. So you're involved with certain universities and colleges. I'm not sure in what context though.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I haven't done anything recently. I used to be for quite a number of years was sort of visiting lecturer at the Royal College of Art, and I've done some little bits of I've done quite a lot of presentations in different colleges, and not just in this country. But I've nothing planned at the moment at all. In fact, the last workshop we gave was about a month ago up here in the Lake District, and it was going back to slipware, our ceramics, and it was just. It's been so many years since I've done the hands-on ceramics, and it was lovely to get back to clay and slips and teaching a class of enthusiastic students. So yeah, maybe one day I'll do a workshop, and if I do, I'll advertise it on my website and Instagram and what have you.
Yeah, well, let us know, Michael, and we'll certainly let all the people know that are interested in that idea.
Thank you, Paul. Thanks.
We'll help you promote that for sure. Okay, and Carla has also asked, any suggestions for someone going, I suppose, coming at it from the opposite direction that you did? I mean, she's saying suggestions for someone coming from Rhino to ceramics rather than what you did, from ceramics to Rhino. Does that change anything? How would you have any comments on that?
That's a great question, because I firmly believe, as I sort of alluded to in the presentation, that in order for a project to make something to make something well, you have to choose the right materials and the right processes. So it's about appropriate use of tools. So for me, as I've said a couple of times, it's the idea that leads the way. So what can I use Rhino for that will open up possibilities when I'm in the ceramic workshop using clay and conventional tools? Can I make something through Rhino software that will aid the making of a three-dimensional object? So it might be that I design some tools that can be used in the ceramics workshop. So that might be something as simple as a profile that you can be used if you're coiling a pot, or if you're throwing a pot. You could use a profile to build up against, to check check the shape of your pot, making sure it sort of follows the profile that you have designed. I have thought about printing molds as well, printing plaster molds that can be used for slip casting, which is where you use liquid clay, and you fill the mold with liquid clay, leave it in the mold for, it can be anything, a couple of minutes to 20 minutes, and you pour out the excess, and it leaves a skin of clay on the inside of the mold. The mold then is usually in two parts or multiple parts, and can be, after a little while, can be taken apart, and the pot comes out. So there's potential to use printing in the making of conventional ceramics. But to sum it up, it's really about the idea and using the tools and processes and materials appropriately. So yeah, that's is the way I would look at it.
Okay, thanks, Michael. Yeah, makes sense. Nicholas asks, have you always worked alone on Rhino, or I guess I think you have, haven't you? This is all your work.
Have.
Yes.
Apart from when lovely Phil Cook sort of is looking over my shoulder virtually and helping out with tricky technical problems, and often it's something that's actually quite simple that I didn't know how to do, and he helps me out. So Phil's great.
Sure. If the bike ride doesn't, yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, there was I think the answer to some of the questions that you raised within the presentation. We'll come back to you on this, but there is, okay. I don't know if you're aware of the picture command in order to import the 2D vectors, and then the plugin called Vectorize that used to be called Trace, that I think would help you as well. But we need to look at it again. I don't know if you're aware. Have you come across that plugin? I don't want to go into any details now, but
I obviously introduced the image into Rhino, as a JPEG or whatever. It's there in the background, and I can trace over it. But it takes me flipping hours to do. I got an iPad Pro with a pencil, thinking that I could create. Somebody was saying you could create in Illustrator and import Illustrator files into Rhino that then would become active curves. But I don't know what I'm doing wrong. But it sounds like you've got a better idea.
I think we do, and Phil's going to give you a call.
Okay,
talk
great.
About it. So it's probably better we do that than go through it here. But if anyone else, of course, here has issues with Rhino, they're welcome to get in touch. Okay, one more question here, and this will probably be the last that we've got time for. William has been printing molds and then filling them with cement. He's interested in progressing to using clay instead. He just wanted to mention that.
Okay, that's really good. Excellent. Yeah, and I don't see why not. I mean, if it's using a powder printer with, like the old Z-Core printers, because that material is a kind of plaster material, and there's probably other castable materials that can be printed. Experiment with ceramic slips. You can buy ready-made ceramic slips from some of the pottery material companies in Stoke-on-Trent, if you're based in the UK, that is. But they're not expensive and well worth experimenting with. The other thing you can do is, if you really get into the ceramic slip casting, then you could print the model and have a mold maker make the plaster mold for you. That would be sort of stage, the next stage, if you really get into ceramic casting. That's again something that I've got. Actually, I've got a design up in front of me on my notice board here that I would like to have the model printed probably on a Z-Core machine, and then have a ceramic mold made. It's a piece that I'm hoping to develop for this exhibition in Nashville. So we'll see how that one goes. But yeah, I don't see why you can't go from concrete to cement. Concrete to ceramic, I should say. I think it's a logical step.
Yeah, excellent. Okay, well, with that, I think, unless you've got anything else, Steph, we're going to wrap it up.
Yeah, I think we've covered them all. Thank you.
Okay, so just to say then, thank you everybody that's attended this evening.
Yes, thank you very much.
Evening in the UK.
Yeah, thanks very much for sticking with it. I hope, I hope you all got something out of it. I appreciate you taking the time.
Well, we appreciate your time as well, Michael. Thanks very much for joining us.
Pleasure, Paul.
Yeah, and just for everybody, keep up to date with the upcoming meetings. Join us, follow us on social media, or you can join, make sure you get our newsletters you can join on via the Simply Rhino website. Just want to say thank you, of course, to our two sponsors for these meetings that help us organise these meetings. Beam, the producers of a plugin that helps people get Rhino models to Revit and backwards and forwards. Nothing to do with the topics that we're talking about tonight, but anyway. And PNY, who distribute a very good range of graphics cards for Rhino. I'm sure you've come across their Quadro boards, etc. in the past. Okay. So other than that, thank you, Steph. Thank you, Michael. And everyone have a nice evening.
Thank you very much.
Thanks,
okay. Bye all.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.
everybody. Thanks for joining us.
Bye-bye.
Cheers. Cheers, Michael. Bye. Bye.
Bye.